Hi, I'm Elizabeth Harris, the owner of Insight Gallery in Fredericksburg, Texas, and today we're talking with Oreland Joe Sr., who is going to be telling us some information about his beautiful ledger work as well as his stone carvings. So Oreland, you have been known historically for your stone carvings, and you've begun incorporating these beautiful ledger pieces into your body of work. Can you tell us something about the technique that goes into creating these pieces?
Yes, first of all, I wanted to create something rather just on pencil and paper, which the original ledgers are made or drawn out of way back in the, probably starting 1840 all the way up to 1890 and even beyond that, and the modern ledgers today. So I thought, and I developed a technique where we've got the regular canvas, and then there's another canvas on top, which is a little more textured, a little more gritty, and in the process, you've got to worry about air bubbles when you're smoothing that out. And once that's on, and then it goes back to drawing on another sheet of paper, large sheet of paper, and getting the horse movement right, all the figures right. And once that happens, I back away and just rethink it, leave it maybe for a couple of days, and just think on it some more, add or change the movement of horses, and begin to just work with color.
Now, you've talked to me before about wanting to honor the primitive nature of the ledger pieces. Is that something that, as you're drawing the movement of the horses, and tell me where that folds into the pieces?
Yes, the historical ledgers, they're basically, the horses are pretty stiff. I mean, there's some ledger artists that know what they're doing, but I would say 80% of the artists back then, it falls into a stylistic form of basically stiff horse foot, or everything's a little stiff, because that was a period where they were probably started drawing, and a lot of those images ended up also on robes, buffalo robes, elk robes, teepee, and even on everyday dress. So that in itself was a challenge to say, how do I present this? You know, I want to keep it within the ledger art style, but also create movement. And I think I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to that. So talking about the horses, I wanted more movement, because, you know, in sculpture I've done that. I've always been able to achieve movement of some type, and I wanted to do the same thing in painting. And so every one of the horses, they're different. They're not stencil, they're not photocopies, they're all hand drawn, every one of them. The head movement, the horse movement, the body movement. And then another thing I deal with is color. You know, of course, the warriors up front are always more colorful than the guys in the back. And so it's layer upon technique, and then other layers of, after that, the idea is, after I get the idea, and then you sit back and then you decide, well, what's the color balance of the horses? You know, it's just like here, the strongest colors are here and lighter there, but yet I threw in a white horse, and it just balances the whole scheme of it. And I like to say something about the background. It's almost an ochre color, because I'm trying to match the, like, old paper, you might say, or something worn, and the edges are treated in the same manner too, all the way around, of an old piece of muslin or cotton.
It definitely achieves the effect of looking like an old piece and having that historical nature to it. Tell me about how history and the stories of these pieces have influenced you. I know you've been doing a lot of historical research so that they tell a story, not just a cultural story, but an actual historical event.
Yes, the Cheyenne, Sioux, Arapaho, Utes, Shoshone, Pawnees, they were all in that Montana, including the Crows, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, Indian Territory, as early as the 1800s, and it developed even more by 1815, 1820. There were dog soldiers actually there, and they were migrating south all the time, and they were running into all these other nations, the Kaws, the Omaha, and so forth, and there were, I'm sure, a lot of trade going on back then, but there were also battles in between. And then what really made war was the coming of the Americans along the Platte River, the Arkansas, the Smoky Hills, and then the gold rush didn't help at all, and everything, it just flooded. And so all the people were trying to do was protect themselves, and that's the reason for so many battles. But by then, there were already a lot of societies among the Cheyenne, and that was the elk soldiers, the Kit Foxes, the Bowstrings, the Ridgemen, and a lot of different societies. I'm Southern Ute and Navajo, but also within that community, that region, there was trade, there was capturing of each other's people, there was horse stealing, and they travel long distances. It's amazing how long they could stay on a trail for days and days, and warriors were gone from their families for months, But particularly young warriors, they would go on a war party to gain honors. That's how you grew up as a man back then, is to go and gain some honors, get a scalp or two, or bring back some horses. And so there's quite a lot of development among the tribes. Talking about societies, for instance, this one here, it's called the Wolves Capturing Pawnee Ponies. And the Cheyenne and the Pawnees were natural enemies, and I don't know if it's still true today, but they still, there's confrontation in there. So the scene here is, I would say right around 1860, to where they're raiding, or have planned previously days before to raid the Pawnee Ponies, and they have just finished raiding. But let me talk about this pipe first, sure. In order to get a war party together, the holy man would actually initiate it and go to a war leader and say, we were offended. They kind of did that to us or that to us, and so we want to revenge or retaliate. And so they would take the pipe to the war leader, the holy man, offer it to him, and if the war leader took it and smoked it, that means, hey, let's do this.
Okay.
And if they took it to another war leader, the more, the better, the bigger the war society or the warriors that were involved. So that's what this symbol means. And up on top there, the bird, which is represents an eagle, and it's done in symbolic form. That's representing the power of a man, the power of a person, or the war society. And the Cheyenne people, from my understanding, they don't believe that they live on the earth, but they enjoy the symbolism of the universe, the Milky Way, the crescent moon, the sun, the morning star, And so they use that quite a bit on their shields and their weapons. And so to add to, as far as ledger art, to add, put a lot of symbolism in there. The story is quite long, but nevertheless, they've achieved stealing the horses, and now the scene is he's gotten his mirror. He's signaling a couple of hills away to the other wolves and saying, "We got the horses. Let's go." And so that's what the scene is here.
Okay. So Oreland, can you tell me about the historical significance of these two pieces?
Yes, this one on the top is called Protection of the Medicine Rattle, and right away you can see the medicine rattle at the top there, and then the crescent moon again. And this one is, a lot of it begins to get personal when you start visualizing and dreaming, and besides getting the horse right and the warrior the way you want him riding, the shields, and it becomes almost a dream type of thing. And back to the first painting, we talked about the ledger. This one here, I incorporated the yellow strip representing, maybe it was hot, maybe it was warm, maybe the sun was coming down. And then the spots of the little gray spots in there, also representing possibly hailstone. Then we have the, every warrior, I believe, after doing a lot of research, particularly the dog soldiers, they were also sun dancers. And they also had other gifts, you might say, maybe gifts of healing, maybe gifts of seeing beforehand. And so every painting almost becomes individual, particularly when I am just painting one person. Here, on a shield, there's a crescent moon symbol, and it's very special to see that. Many people don't pay attention to the phases of the moon, but I believe all Indian tribes, they say that there's 9 phases of the moon, and different things happen during that time, each month, each season. So on his shield, that's basically his medicine. And the trail of feathers there, those in old times were eagle feathers off the tail of an eagle. And then of course the horse, he's more of a paint horse, but I've incorporated brighter colors just to bring the painting out. So back to the title, Protection of the Medicine Rattle. Supposedly the medicine man, at the right time, that in an ideal situation, the warrior would prepare himself. He would take his weaponry, his items, maybe his spear, his bow, his quiver, his shield, his axe, all these different things, maybe just lay him, and the medicine man would go over with his rattle and actually sing upon, maybe touch and maybe shake it a little. And so being protected, there's an imaginary symbol up there, a dream symbol, and he's got so much faith in that he's writing out. He's saying, my horse is blessed, my shield is blessed, my headdress is blessed, I have no fear. And that's the reason I believe they say, it's a good day to die, because they want to meet their creator dressed in their finest, So that's the story behind this piece here.
I always love the spiritual significance that is wound into all of your pieces. It's always one of my favorite parts of the story. Tell me about this piece.
This painting is called South Platte Raiding Party. As you look at the map today, the South Platte runs all the way from the Rocky Mountains through Denver, all the way up to Sterling, Julesburg, and on into the main Platte River, which was also inhabited by the Cheyenne and Arapaho. And as you go further on the north side into Nebraska, that was the Sioux Territory. And there was an instance in 1864, shortly after, not even a month after the Sand Creek Massacre, where all the raids there were in retaliation for the massacre down in Sand Creek and other battles. So the warriors were there for a time, and the warrior in the middle here, his name is Whitehorse, and he was one of the main dog soldiers. And I've depicted the kit foxes, meaning that you can identify the warrior society by their war bonnets.
Okay.
And so all the three guys are wearing antelope horns rather than buffalo horns. And one of the things I like, and it's pretty challenging, is to paint the warrior first and then go back at his horse, and say what colors are matching, but also you're thinking in spiritual terms. What was he thinking, like, part of the horse's thighs are red. He's got a red streak down the middle of his forehead, possibly 2 sun symbols. And so each one is different. This guy has a combination of black, turquoise, and yellow, so it's working with color. But back to the battles, I mean, they were so angered at the settlers and the army that, and we're talking about probably 2,000 to 3,000 warriors at a time.
Wow.
And it wasn't just one huge war party. They would split every morning, probably for 14 or 15 days. They would each part their ways, do battle, come back. They would bring coffee back. They would bring sugar back. And that's where the soldier coats came in, the pioneer wear shirts, boots, hats. And so that was all happening during that time. And right down here, there's some soldiers were stationed there in Julesburg, and so they burnt that camp down, and then they also burnt a lot of buildings down. So there's a little indication here. Yeah. And also, being a person who likes birds, I involve all kinds of hawks, eagles, and this one's a gosh hawk here. He's kind of throwing his medicine to the warriors to assist them. And I really believe that because, crows are in tune, bluebirds, any type of bird, when something's happening, they either make a lot of noise or they get quiet, So I believe that the Indian people were close to them. And this is just a little symbol here representing the buffalo skull. That means that you've also hurt our way of life, killing the buffalo, and the main source of being sustained from the land and animals. And then there's a little dragonfly here. He's just shooting out, darting out before the warriors, supporting him on the side too.
Okay.
So that's what this painting is about, and it's historically correct.
It's beautiful. It's really lovely. I love all of the stories that go with these, but I think that there's a lot of historical significance to you're preserving a lot of history through this work. Orland, this oil painting, Warrior Eagle Chant, I see your theme again with the birds, and tell me a little something about this piece.
Again, we're talking about holy men or war society chiefs. They're really the ones that started or initiated and got the young men and some of the old warriors riled up, And back then, the younger warriors were all ready to go just at anything to gain an honor. And when they got into a group, it was like, yeah, I'm with the larger guys, But back to the holy man here, and he's been through the wars, the battles. He's now probably over 50 years old, and I pictured this guy about maybe 65. They've passed the pipe. It's been accepted, and it's been offered, and so the morning of the battle. And again, it's going along the Platte River, the Republican rivers, Cheyenne, of course, possibly going to raid troops or going to battle against another band. And his stick is very powerful. First off, the eagle image in the back, that's the eagle medicine. And then he's got a stick with eagle talons on it. And then other medicine, which is feathers. He's got his eagle bone whistle, other medicine on his, wearing his shirt, and even here the lightning strike. And then the designs are also important. And sometime there would be another holy man that designed the war bonnet, but sometimes a lot of it was done by themselves. And on a traditional bonnet with any tribe, there's 24 feathers, eagle feathers, and they all have to be from the same bird. You can't mix them up. So the idea here is he's singing his song, he's shaking his rattle. He probably you're supposed to, in any ceremony, it's 4 is a sacred number. Not only do you offer it to the 4 different cardinal directions, but there are also 4 songs. There are also 4 meanings, and so this is what he's doing. So the warriors are riding off, and he's shaking his stick and possibly dipping it into the dirt and making the dirt fly as they go away. And this means that maybe there'll be a dust storm against the enemy in some fashion. And there's a little indication of a dust moving here.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he's singing his, possibly his eagle song. And then maybe at the end, he'll get his bone whistle and blow that 4 times again. Okay. So it's a very powerful medicine man piece.
Yeah, indeed it is. Orland, this piece, Whirling Wind on the Plains, I can already tell by just the name, the title alone, has a beautiful story to go with it. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes. The image is a dog soldier, and one of my favorite things to do in sculpture is to carve bones and muscles, and that comes from my training in Italy. So I really enjoyed, you know, the muscle structure. Yeah. And instead of it being stiff, you know, the training in Italy is that you always have movement. And in the beginning, I start out it's somewhat of I have a like an abstract sense of beginning, you know, shapes, planes, and that's how I look at it. And so that's how the whole sculpture developed. But the idea is he's in a robe, and he's got a left-wing eagle fan, and that's the male side of an eagle is the left side. And once you show that, when other warriors or men see that means that you mean business. Okay. You know, that this guy is not to be reckoned with till he finishes what he says or what he's going to do. And so and his stance too is real important. Being maybe an older dog soldier, and he's wearing a Cheyenne dog soldier headdress, and he's got a trailer on the back side too.
Wow, there's beautiful, the feather detail work all the way down the back. That's just gorgeous.
Yeah, one of the things I might mention is as a young man, 7th grade, 8th grade, I did study with an eagle chanter, and many times we handle many feathers, so I know where the primaries, the secondaries, and all these feathers fit, and every feather isn't black at the tip. It's you know, depending on the age of the eagle, it can be striped, it can be almost white and spotted, a variety. So, but then the stone is almost an almond color. And one thing about carving limestone is you're almost working with just highlights and shadows. It doesn't have color with it. But back then, like on the Darlington Agency, they developed, there was metal that was brought in by the traders, so they learned to make breastwear, old buffalo breastplates, maybe weasel skins, ermine skins. So they had a lot of animal pelts that they wore too, and of course the new trade cloth that was brought in along the rivers. And so it's a very unique piece. I think it's the composition is pretty nice.
The
I
composition is wonderful,
Yeah.
and the detail is just incredible with the little feathers here and all of the adornments to it. It really takes my breath away that you're able to accomplish that in stone, nonetheless. It's a tremendous amount of detail.
Yeah, it's really to me stone. Of course, it's hard, but then you're balancing. It's a challenge every day to carve stone, but at the same time, you're also patient, and I recognize the beauty that it can become. So when it's time to quit, you leave it as it wants, maybe 2 or 3 days, and let it rest. Let me rest, and you go back to it, and it's fresh. I think I did the arms separately just by itself, and I didn't have to worry about the rest of it. So I do parts at a time.